the dead of night, under the cloak of darkness, Phareloch Castle looms ominously against the New Jersey skyline. Its towering silhouette, a stark reminder of a past steeped in mystery and tragedy. Within these ancient walls, a chilling tale unfurls, whispering of ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena that defy explanation. Our story plunges into the heart of terror, starting with the harrowing experiences of those who dared to inhabit the castle. Picture this: a cold, eerie night. The castle's new occupants awaken to the haunting sound of a pipe organ, its melancholy tune echoing through the empty corridors. But the castle harbors no such instrument. The music plays from beyond the grave, a spectral serenade from the castle's original master, Bill Beatty, whose presence still permeates every stone and shadow. As we delve deeper, the castle's grim history comes to light, a history marred by sudden death, unfulfilled dreams, and a lingering spirit unable to part with his earthly domain. The castle, initially a symbol of grandeur and aspiration, transforms into a scene of nightmarish encounters, where the line between the living and the dead blurs ominously.
Welcome back to Retraced Echoes. As always, I'm your host. My name is Bert, and as you heard in the introduction, tonight's story is going to take us into the very realms of the unknown. Do you believe in ghosts? Robert Stack asked almost 26.2 million viewers on January 29th of 1992 on the show Unsolved Mysteries. Now, more than likely on that very night, I was probably watching that exact episode. Now, back then, he said that almost 25% of people believed in ghosts. Now, anyone that knows me knows I had to go online and see, was there any surveys that's been conducted relatively recently? I was hoping for 2024, but of course we're in March of 2024. Good luck finding a survey that happens to be with ghosts. But I did find one in 2021. Now, the million-dollar question I have to ask, and I'd like everyone to put in the comments down below, I'm curious how many people actually believe this, because I'm going to be honest, this kind of shocked me just a little bit. In 2021, there was a survey that was conducted, and it gave a percentage of people that voted. How many people do you think believe in ghosts in the year 2021? Now, no cheating. Don't advance forward in the video and just put whatever that number is, you bunch of heathen cheaters. But if you was to guess, how many people do you believe in ghosts in 2021? Now remember, in 1992 it was 25%. We live in a day of science and technology. Do you believe that number to be higher, or do you believe that number to be lower? Hopefully you got the answers down in the comment, because we're moving on. 29 years later, in October of 2021, the survey was conducted by Statistica. Now, that survey, it asked a very simple question, the same one I posed at the very beginning of the podcast, and the same one that Robert Stack asked 29 years ago. Do you believe in ghosts? Now, the survey was conducted in the United States. It was from anyone that was over the age of 18. And in addition to that, before we go too far down the rabbit hole, it was almost split perfectly between men and women. In fact, it was 52% male, 47% female. 20% said that they could not answer one way or another. But believe it or not, a whopping 36% said that they do believe. I mean, who would have thought? 36%. I was absolutely dumbfounded by the fact that there was an 11% increase from then until now. Because again, we live in a day and age of science and technology. I would believe if I was to poll anyone that was watching this podcast or listening wherever you listen to our podcast, what the percentage was of people that believed, that watched or listened, I would say that the bulk of you guys would be believers. But enough about statistics. Let's get on with the story. Now, in season 4, episode 18 of Unsolved Mysteries, Robert Stack told of a man named Bill Beatty. He had a dream. He wanted to build his all-time favorite kind of home. Technically, it was a castle. It was a 17th century Norman castle that would find itself in Baskin Ridge, New Jersey. It would later be known as Phareloch Castle, and it would sit on 180 acres of land. Now, Bill had massive plans. He wanted it to be 29 rooms. He wanted to have a slated roof stained glass windows that was imported from France, as well as he wanted handmade floor tiles imported from Finland as well as Portugal, a tower, a great hall with winding staircases. The cost of such an amazing structure would have cost $120,000. That was back in 1923. If you looked at it in today's money, that would run somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2.2 million. Now, what a lot of people doesn't know is that on the property, there was 9 total barns. Again, we're talking about 180 acres. They tore down 6 of the 9 barns to use the beams in the construction of the actual castle. Now, there was a lot of things that I had questions of. Unsolved Mysteries kind of glanced over some of it. Some of the questions that I had was, who was Bill Beatty? Where did he get all of his money? Well, come to find out, Bill was kind of a big deal. He was an advertising executive, and his brother Frank, that was one of the 2 brothers that helped him out. He was the mayor of Bernard's Township. Now, again, it was Bill, it was Frank, and he had another brother. His name was Henry. They began building the castle in 1923. Now, in 1930, not everything was complete on the castle. They was kind of building it as they go, but what they wanted to do was build enough of the property up so that the family could move in before it was completely constructed. Now, unfortunately, disaster hit the family head on 1 year later. Not quite a year, a little less than a year. In March of 1931, Bill became ill with a strep infection, and later, he died inside the castle. To be completely transparent, in my research, it reported that he died of a strep infection, but on Unsolved Mysteries, it said that he died of influenza. Either way, Bill was taken away way too young. He was only 45 years old. He would never see the completion of his dream home. Or would he? Sarah, Bill's wife, she never did get remarried. In fact, she would end up raising all 4 of the kids inside the walls of the castle. And with the help of Frank, his brother, they was able to complete the castle just 5 years later. And they did it exactly the way that Bill would have wanted it done. Now, Sarah and the kids, she would live there another 5 years. And during that time, a lot of people said that she struggled. She hated the fact that her beloved Bill was no longer with her and no longer with the kids. She missed him dearly. Now, the talk around town was that Sarah was having people over and they were trying to conduct seances. She wanted to communicate with Bill. She wanted to make sure that he was proud of her and his brother in completing his vision. And she would do almost anything she could to talk to the love of her life just one more time. Now, there wasn't a whole lot about these seances. Trust me, I looked. I looked almost everywhere because I was beyond curious what she might have opened up. But as you will see in today's podcast, she opened up something. On March 21st of 1947, Robert Lumpkin, he would buy the property for $40,000. He would end up converting that castle into an elementary boarding school for boys. It didn't take very long for the children as well as the teachers to start reporting some super spooky, scary phenomena. They started hearing some pipe organ music that would just start echoing through the corridors. I laugh because that would probably scare the absolute life out of me. I mean, back in the old days, I think that was, what was it? Scooby-Doo? Where they would play that pipe organ music. I swear, I feel like it was Scooby-Doo where that happened. There's something about a good old pipe organ music to get the blood pumping. Imagine just sitting there one day and out of nowhere you hear pipe organ music just being played, some eerie tune. Personally, I think I could handle seeing something even if it's out the corner of my eye, maybe see something glancing from a distance. There's something about sounds, something about hearing things that just kind of change it for me. I think that's when things get kind of turned to a whole new level. Like the story I told not that long ago, it was the Snedeker haunting, right? Snedeker? Anyway, the mother was downstairs and she would hear her kids screaming upstairs. She'd get to the room and the kids was never there. Or the cases where we talk about there'd be knocking or scratching of the walls. I don't know. Now, what makes the pipe organ music playing inside the castle so scary is not the fact that they didn't know who was playing the organ. It was the fact that there was no pipe organ in the actual castle. So now we have a phantom pipe organ that's playing some type of an eerie tune. Tell me that isn't creepy. To make things even more creepy, Bill used to play a pipe organ. In fact, he would play it very often. It was his kind of way of relaxing. So his way of being creative. Now, on my other podcast, Deceptive Reality, we oftentimes speak of, I believe, that ghosts and the paranormal's on a different dimension. And if you believe that ghosts exist and they're in that dimension, I think that when there's a rift or a tear in whatever that dimension is and they kind of merge with our dimension, we're capable of smelling things that we wouldn't typically smell or hearing things that we wouldn't typically hear. That's things that's in their dimension. Could it be that Bill loved his castle so very much that in his afterlife, he lived there with all of his favorite things? The sounds that everyone would have heard there was just a glimpse into another dimension that lays right on top of ours. Or perhaps the energy of Bill, maybe it imprinted itself somewhere in the castle. I mean, after all, I'm pretty sure his blood, sweat, and tears was all embedded in a lot of the castle. I mean, he helped build the vast majority of it. I don't know that the vast majority of it, but I would say over 50% of it was built with his help. It would only take a few years for Wood Castle schools to close. The castle would become vacant. Now, unfortunately, during this time frame, the castle would take a turn in ways that I know Bill would have absolutely hated. A much darker turn. It would become kind of a hot spot for criminal activities, youth vandalism, the regular appearance from the police. Mostly because it was so massive, it was kind of out of the way. For being honest, it's completely unable to be determined what kind of criminal activities took place here. There's also rumors and speculation that there could have been some occult things that may have occurred on the property. Now, being so that the castle was already kind of known for being a hot spot of the paranormal activity, I think that if there was an occult that wanted to provide some of these, and it's not uncommon to see it. We see it a lot of times. If some place is haunted for occult things to occur there, it's because they're wanting to use the property and the portals that's already there to open up for more of the wrong reasons. Now, being so that the castle at this point was already considered kind of a trouble area, there was a lot of talks about whether they should maybe tear down the castle, maybe create a private recreational club. Now, none of that ended up happening, thank goodness. The castle did end up changing hands multiple times over the next 2 decades, and the bulk of the episode of Unsolved Mysteries is on the next part. They basically on Unsolved Mysteries covered Bill Beatty, and then it jumped to 1972 with Donald and Carol Berlingame, who purchased the castle and began to remodel the property. Now, what their idea was, they was going to live on the property and turn it into an antique shop. They wanted to do a complete revamp. They wanted to change the name of the castle to Berlingame Farms, where they would raise Himalayan cats. The address also was changed to Green Mountain Road, but they discovered very quickly that there was something with them in the property.
Carol was really the first one to feel some sort of presence, and she had a friend that was sort of an amateur parapsychologist. And we brought her in, and she said, well, there definitely is a presence here. He's definitely friendly, and he's male. And Carol said, well, maybe we should try to get rid of him. Shouldn't we have a seance? And she said, no, you better leave things exactly the way they are. He's friendly, he's happy, let it go at that.
Now, as Carol and Donald had fully moved in, they started hearing some weird things. They started hearing some hammering noises, as well as the disembodied footsteps of someone or something walking up and down the staircase. Was this Bill attempting to transform the castle back to how he envisioned it so many years ago? I mean, at this point, the castle had made a drastic transformation through the years. I mean, it was a shadow of what it once was. It had faced damages, as well as conversion into different things through the years. Now, Carol and Donald wouldn't be very long before they would experience the entity on a much deeper level. One night, they wanted to watch a little late night TV with each other. I just thought about it. Last week's episode, which was also an Unsolved Mysteries episode, the couple was watching TV in bed when things started going haywire. Maybe that's the key. Listen, you heard it here first, folks. If you're going to not want to have paranormal activity, do not watch TV in bed. But anyway, you got to remember this is also a day and age where there was no remote control. If you wanted to watch a different channel or you wanted to increase the volume, decrease the volume, and have to actually get up and have someone do it. I mean, unless you were them. But often, the changing of channels, they were at the most inopportune times.
You just get into a movie, just the really interesting part, and all of a sudden the station would change. It would go from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And it happened more than one time. I knew that there was a presence here, but what I couldn't figure out was, why was he here? Who was he? When was he going to leave? If in fact was he ever going to leave? It was something I couldn't figure out.
Everyone remember, this had been decades that this castle had been up. It had changed hands many times, and Carol and Donald, they had no clue the actual history of the castle. They wanted to kind of try to understand potentially what was happening inside their home. I mean, they wanted to understand, is their home haunted? If so, by who? Carol and Donald, they started digging into the history, and they ran across a man, Eugene Melville. He worked for Sarah Beatty from 1933 to 1937, and he was full of stories. He had a few experiences with the entity, and he was ready to tell them.
But I have felt him there a lot, even though I've only seen him that once. I can truthfully say that was the only time I ever laid eyes on him, was that once.
The year was now 1937. It had been 3 years since Bill had passed away. Eugene was trying to help Sarah find a bracelet that she lost during a family gathering. They looked almost everywhere. Now in the parlor, as Eugene looked underneath the couch, Sarah kind of jumped back. She was startled. She was looking up at the balcony. Eugene looked at her and he could see the shock in her eyes. He turned around to see a man up above, staring down at the two of them. Sarah said, "It's Bill, my husband." Eugene now was completely confused by what he saw with his own two eyes. He tried to reassure Sarah. He said, "He's been dead, Miss Beatty."
But it was a figure of a man standing there. It didn't stay long there for me to examine it very good. It was just going just like that. It was scary.
Now, as he told his story to Carol and Donald, they knew. They knew that they were indeed sharing their home with the previous owner. Now, Bill, he was supposed to be no longer on this side of life. But they had a feeling that Bill, he loved this castle so much that he had no desire on moving on to whatever could come next. He loved it so much also, he made sure that it was very well taken care of.
We decided we were going to go off for a little ride, and Carol was sort of a fresh air fiend, so she had all the windows open in the servants' wing where we were living.
And Don said, "You better close all the windows, it's supposed to rain." I said, "No, it's not going to rain, don't worry about it, I'm leaving them all open." So I left them open, we went out, and it rained.
See, ladies, sometimes you just gotta trust us. Now, Carol and Donald, they rushed back to the castle to get to those windows. They knew that with those large windows being open, the floor was literally going to be flooded, almost like a bursted pipe. Now, it took them a while to get home. They was a little ways out, and the rain, it was relentless. They rushed as soon as they pulled into the driveway. They jumped out of the car. They had a game plan. Carol was going to take care of some of the windows. Donald was going to take care of some of the other windows. They wanted to try to prevent as much additional damage as they could.
We came home and all of the casement windows, which open from the inside and open to the inside, were all closed and latched. So there wasn't a drop of rain in the house. So our only conclusion was, because there's no other way for them to have been closed, is that Bill helped us out. When he saw the rain coming, he closed all the windows and gave us a hand.
At this point, Bill was welcomed into the home by Carol and Donald. They knew that he meant no harm. All he wanted to do was protect his dream home. For so many years before they had gotten there, the castle had been done with things that Bill would have hated. It was used for crime. It faced graffiti, been converted into something that Bill would have never asked for. Now, Carol and Donald, they's trying to get it back to somewhat similar to how it originally was. And Bill, he was showing his gratitude. Carol was thankful going forward. She made sure to let Bill know exactly what was on her mind.
Bill and I have an agreement. I chatted with him one day, because I didn't see him, but I chatted with him anyhow, and I said, Bill, you can stay here for as long as you want. I enjoy having you around. You don't bother me. Just don't ever let me see you, because if I do see you, I'll probably wind up in a padded cell somewhere. So you're welcome to stay, just don't materialize. And he never has. We've had several experiences in the house, one of which was I have a habit of leaving the bread out, because it's handy. And I'd leave it out somewhere, and the next thing I'd turn around, it would be on the floor. I was alone in the kitchen, the bread was on the counter. There was no way that it could have fallen off by itself. And when it did fall off, or fly off, it went a considerable distance, so I know that someone had to have moved it. There was no one else there with me at all, no animals, Don wasn't around, and there was no way the bread could have fallen off the counter because it was set square. And that led me to believe that Bill had to be there saying, "Hi, I'm here." There was just no way that that bread could have fallen off the counter by itself.
It was now 1986. Carol and Donald, they invited Dr. Michaeline Mayer, a noted parapsychologist, to visit the castle and give her impressions of what was going on. Michaeline, she brought along an assistant. Together, they went through the castle looking for anything that would confirm what Carol and Donald was experiencing.
Our physical instruments were not able to detect anything unusual. But in this particular case, the sheer volume of the reports adds to the credibility of the case. People have experienced similar phenomena when living at the castle, even though these are people who may never have spoken to each other. One of our witnesses in this case, a particularly credible witness, in fact, a professional person of some stature, reported seeing in the driveway in front of the castle a person who dissipated right in front of his eyes. I think the big news here is that persons can act as sensors. And when we quantitatively evaluate their responses, we find that we cannot dismiss this evidence as caused by coincidence.
Though Michaeline and her assistant was not able to find anything with their equipment, as she stated, the sheer volume of reports were staggering. As for Carol and Donald, they learned to live with an entity that they believed was Bill Beatty.
Key to existing with a ghost is if you can accept it, you can enjoy it. And when things happen, you just write them off as, oh, it must be the ghost, or it must be Bill, if you happen to know who it is, as in our case we do. And you can have fun with it.
Donald and Carol finally moved out of the castle in 1991. They stated they never had another experience even remotely close to that at their new residence. Now, unfortunately, Carol and Donald, the reason they had to move out was they filed bankruptcy that forced them to sell the castle. And since then, they've both passed away. Now, in 1998, Stephen and Avis bought the property and renamed it back to Phareloch Castle. The address was also changed to 1 Shadowbrook Lane. Now, I've reached out to the current owners of the property and have high hopes that maybe they can reach back out to me with an update. Now, Avis, she has a blog. I'm going to put that down in the description down below. She kind of gives a little bit of a storyline as far as what's happening with the castle, what's going on in her life. Might be something worth checking out. Now, I would absolutely love to have the owners come onto the podcast in the future and maybe give us an update on what's happening at the property, but only time will tell. Now, if you enjoyed this podcast, I think you would also like a podcast that I do with a friend of mine. His name is Nick, and the podcast is Deceptive Reality. Now, every week we delve into unsolved mysteries and we do a deep dive into it, as well as give our own opinions as far as what we think happened. Now, the one releasing this Friday is one that we covered for Madman Markham. It's actually a part 2. Part 1 came out last Friday. Now, this was a man that might have just been a time traveler. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, I would appreciate it if you give us a rating no matter where you listen to your podcast. And if you're watching on the old YouTube machine, I'd appreciate you giving me a little thumbs up. Also, if you're not following my YouTube, you might want to give that a quick glance. My goal is sooner or later to get some reaction videos on maybe some ghost videos that's out there. Kind of tell you what I believe is going on. Is it paranormal or maybe just some good old fakery? Stay tuned for that. I want to thank everyone for joining. And until I see you in the very next podcast, goodbye.